we're still struggling with some trust in technology. And it continues to be a struggle over, some of the issues with technology and as it quickly evolves and problems with data integrity and safety of data. It continues to create some nervousness around it. But I think it is really important for us to embrace it and to get people to understand the importance of it.
You're listening to Food Tech Talk, Supply Chain Insights from Farm to Fork, a podcast discussing the latest trends and technologies in the food and supplements industries, brought to you by Trustwell, featuring conversations with regulatory experts, quality and safety champions, and thought leaders across the industry. I'm your host, Lydia Adams, VP of Marketing at Trustwell. If you're loving the conversation, don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned to the end of the episode where you'll hear our guests tell us their key food industry predictions for 2025. All right, let's jump right in. Welcome to Food Tech Talk, Supply Chain Insights from Farm to Fork. Today, we're delighted to welcome Laura McCready, a highly accomplished food safety and quality assurance professional with nearly 20 years of experience in the food industry. Laura has a strong background in food science, international food law, and food safety, with specialized expertise in regulations, labeling, and data analysis. She currently serves as the Director of Food Safety and Policy at Resource Fine Foods, where she plays a key role in driving food safety practices across a diverse range of operations. Laura is passionate about consumer protection and is committed to ensuring the highest standards of safety and quality in the food supply chain. Welcome to the show, Laura.
Oh, thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, we're really excited to talk through some important topics today. But before we do, I'd love to kind of hear from you. I like to hear from the guests about what your journey is in food safety in this industry and kind of what got you into this field in the first place.
Okay. For me, I should say my love of food and food safety actually started as a kid. I grew up on a farm. I actually raised dairy goats. I remember pasteurizing milk and doing a lot of what I didn't realize then were food safety things. But understanding the importance of food safety, just the aspect of what we did at home and how it was important to keep our food safe and refrigerated and all those things. And honestly, for me, food safety happened gradually. When I went off to college, I chose food science to help connect me to agriculture and my love of science, like love of chemistry. So that really connected that. And I would say over time, food safety developed into more of a profession where, when I got out of college, it was really about quality aspect. But as we continue to, expand as an industry and learn from some failures, to me, food safety really evolved from that.
Yeah, I think that's the first time I've heard somebody who grew up on a farm. So that is super cool that's kind of where it all began. Great. Well, I want to start us off really talking about traceability. As we know, it is a critical aspect of food safety and gets a lot of attention as well these days. So can you walk us through kind of the most efficient ways that you've implemented traceability across supply chains and, how you've mitigated these types of risks?
So I think one of the really important things is using technology. There are a lot of data elements we need to have in traceability. And so how do we do it most efficiently? And it's not entering it by hand. Like how can we leverage, your EDIs and ASNs and that electronic data transfer between systems? We have that information. It's just how do you get it somewhere efficiently? I think that's one big learning that I continue to see to get leveraged and needs to be leveraged to really help make sure that we have the information. Because again, traceability is really there to protect consumers. It's there to get problem product out of the market as soon as we can. And so having that data ready to go is really important and not trying to capture it after you have the failure.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important point. So in terms of the gaps that you've seen, in the industry, like where do you think people maybe miss steps or what are the gaps in connecting and integrating technology into their workflows?
I think some of it's just the not being familiar with the technology available or sometimes hesitant to use it. I think we're still struggling with some trust in technology. And it continues to be a struggle over, some of the issues with technology and as it quickly evolves and problems with data integrity and safety of data, it continues to create some nervousness around it. But I think it is really important for us to embrace it and to get people to understand the importance of it.
Looking to improve your supply chain? At Trustwell, we've been connecting the dots between the food industry and data for over 40 years to give you more control and visibility across the full supply chain. Our comprehensive Food Logic platform and our new Genesis Foods set a new standard for compliance, transparency, and quality across the food industry. Request a demo today. The link is in the show notes, or visit us at trustwell.com. Yeah, absolutely agree. And I feel like every time we talk about traceability, FSMA 204 is another topic that goes alongside that. What are you seeing out there in terms of post, announcement about the potential delay, and how are you guys approaching FSMA 204 today?
Even with the, announcement of the delay, we have not let off steam. Our foot is still on the gas pedal going forward. We look at it as it gives us more time for refinement and improving things, but we still need to keep moving on it because it is a big lift. It's not just us changing our practices. It's also our suppliers being prepared and ready, as well as our customers. We're making an STL food. And so we have some complexity to figure out. And how do you figure it out is honestly jumping in feet first, getting dirty, figuring it out as we go, and really partnering with our customers and suppliers.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I've heard that a lot recently. And you mentioned, kind of before something happens or a food safety, failure. So, in your experience, what are really the most common challenges that arise during a food recall?
I think one of the common challenges is there's lots of people that are willing to help, but what are you supposed to do? I think if you look, we all do a lot of trace exercise or mock recalls, but oftentimes when we're doing that, we're testing our systems. Like, can we find the product? Where did it go? But do we ever, take it a little further and see, well, what are you doing? Well, what are you doing? Because it's not just in most places, it's not just your food safety person or your quality team managing a recall. You have operations involved. You can even have marketing communications involved, lawyers. So there's a lot of different people in an organization that come together to manage a recall, but we don't practice that or necessarily know who to reach out to or even have their contact information in the middle of one. So I think one big learning is people need to know their roles and responsibilities, especially since this is not something we do every day.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and that collaboration is certainly key. Um, Another thing that comes to mind is really about supplier management, supplier relationships. So, for you, what are the main check boxes that you think of when it comes to vetting suppliers, choosing suppliers, and maintaining that relationship?
Openness, I think, is a big part. Remembering that food safety should not be a competitive advantage. We're doing this for protection of consumers, and remembering that one of the foundations of our whole food supply chain is trust. And without trust, it's really hard to maintain consumer acceptance and survive as a company. So we need our suppliers to trust that what they share with us will stay confidential and that we need to trust them as well. So that's really important. And I find to maintain that trust, it's often open conversation and peer-to-peer conversations. Sometimes there's just a lack of understanding of what we're asking for, what we're expecting. And when you start to talk peer-to-peer, there is that understanding of we're talking food safety, and it is really important.
Yeah, and I imagine just, having that relationship as a foundation also helps with compliance. But is there anything additional that you feel like has been beneficial in terms of just ensuring compliance from suppliers?
I would say, we went through a journey where we went from managing suppliers through email and Word documents, and that was definitely hard to maintain the compliance. And so moving to the software system and using technology to help leverage made a big difference for us. So we do use Food Logic, and that has really helped us with managing our suppliers and expectations. We have a way of checking our documents outdated, who submitted information, and not having it lost in someone's email. Things get lost there. And within the system, we're able to find things. And that's really helped us maintain compliance and move the program forward into the future.
Yeah, that's awesome. And do you feel like that kind of works together with recall, traceability, supplier management. How do you align those things, especially, within a system like Food Logic?
I think for us, what we're using in Food Logic, actually, we have a better understanding of who our suppliers are, where they're making our product, and we have all of this information at a touch of a button. And we can open the screen and find it. So it helps us understand, if there is an issue with a specific commodity, seeing are we using that commodity? Or if it's an area in a certain part of a country, we're able to really drill down and see that to help us gain extra awareness when there are some issues going on in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And just kind of speaking about collaboration, something that we've been exploring more with guests is really the concept of bringing together R&D and supply chain food safety teams within the same company. Have you found that that has helped, or is why is that important, and how can companies really ensure a strong alignment there?
So we do spend a lot of time in collaboration, cross-functional work. So I would say, like when we are evaluating, ingredients, R&D, purchasing, food safety, quality, we're all involved in that process. And so a lot of it's just been open communication and knowledge, sharing our knowledge. Because when you have someone in product development, they're aware of something they're trying to do, but then there may be a food safety concern and vice versa. So as we, work together, have workflows with each other where we can interact and share information has been very helpful with continuing to share the knowledge across the different departments.
Yeah, absolutely. Which kind of leads us into kind of my next topic, which is, food safety culture. So, in your experience in the 2 decades that you've, been in the food industry, how has this concept of food safety culture really evolved?
I would say for me, initially, it didn't really exist. I mean, gosh, like for me, go in college, like HACCP was starting and that whole aspect of how to, kind of how that started in the food industry and protecting astronauts. And then over time, the focus was on quality. But then I think as an industry, we had some big failures where it really brought to light the importance of food safety. We focused on the science, and over time, I realized it's also the culture, and the culture I really say is the why and how people interact with it. And so it's really evolved over time. And I think even more now than before, understanding that we live food safety at work, but then we're also living it at home. So really starting to connect all the pieces together that it's just part of our life as humans.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of that universal experience that we have, as professionals in this industry, is that we have this desire to make food safer, and we also have families, and we're consumers, and so we understand kind of that need to bring that home. So yeah, absolutely agree with that. And in your case, I would imagine this has been a challenge, but maybe not. But how do you kind of continue that food safety culture across operations in multiple countries?
I think part of it is for everyone to understand the amount of trust we have in our food supply chain. So even in other countries, they trust the food supply chain. And so the importance of culture is helping to maintain that trust. And I think the other thing that's connected with people is the why, and not why we have food safety, but why, as people interacting with food safety, why do we care? We all have our different reasons, and understanding that helps us with those decisions. And there's always some special reason that we are drawn to it and we have passion for it. Because it's similar to why we connect with food. I mean, a lot of people in the food profession have a reason that they're drawn to work in food. And so we all have a reason we're drawn to champion food safety and want to participate in it and support it. So understanding why it's important to you really helps you in any department, in any position, really support the concept to continue to grow the culture.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those who are listening who perhaps want to drive that culture forward in their organizations, or are seeing that it's not as adopted, what is your advice, or do you have some examples of how you can be a driver for that change within your organization?
For me, I actually ended up reaching out to our learning and development team. I realized pretty quickly that when it comes to where I'm comfortable, it's a science around the bacteria and other things like that, but there is a whole science about how to connect with adults. How do adults learn? So I connected up with my L&D department to start to understand the workings of adult brains and getting some concepts of how we learn as adults is different than when we're kids. That we need to stop and explain the why to something will help adults then follow through. How as adults we make commitments in a different way. And so to me, that really helped me connect with the concept of culture and how to develop and grow it by understanding that adults and people are involved and how do we connect with them.
Yeah, I think, culture and food safety and leadership really kind of all go together. And have you found that it's helpful to, inspire teams? And how have you done that as a leader, to kind of engage that passion with the team?
So I actually have spent time creating a kind of a way to connect with them and some of the concept has just been around, every company has a food safety pass. And so understanding what the past is and how you've grown from it. Getting people to understand that we all have a food safety culture. Some of it's more defined than others at companies. So how do we start to define it to give people a direction to go into? And I think the other piece is like I understand why I care so passionately about food safety, and it's a personal story about a family member and being allergic to peanuts and being at a family event where they were exposed to peanuts from someone accidentally having cross contamination in their kitchen. And so I share that experience with people to help them understand why I care so much. And honestly, that has been one of the most impactful things that I've gotten feedback from people I've spoken with of understanding why I was so passionate about it and getting them to understand why they care about food safety.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting the more people that you talk to that have those stories and you take a look at the impact that is out there, especially with, allergens and all of that. And there's so many people that, have that personal connection. And maybe they don't work in food safety. Maybe they, just have that, a family member. But I think it is just so important to bring it back to that why in terms of kind of like, where does that that inspiration and that engagement and that passion come from? So yeah, it sounds like that would absolutely be kind of a way to connect those dots with people.
Mhm. And I think they also having a leader be able to explain and be open with them and share a personal story has also helped them connect as well for some people.
Yeah, definitely. And I know that you have a background in regulatory affairs. And so, how do you prepare your team and suppliers for new compliance requirements? I know we already mentioned FSMA 204 is a big one, but certainly just how are you always ready for new regulations and how do you kind of take them to the next step with that?
So I think for me, usually, honestly, the first time a new reg comes out, so FSMA 204, for example, read the proposed rule and kind of digested that a little bit. But then when it was finalized, actually reading the preamble where they kind of do the Q&A, the rationale or the, for the comments of how FDA felt helps me start to understand like what their intent is. Because there's oftentimes just reading the rule, it's like a couple sections and you're like, okay, this is a big shift for industry, but I don't quite understand why. So spending time reading um, and then processing and starting to, draw some workflows and also starting to ask the questions. When I did have questions, reaching out to FDA to get clarification because many of the questions I have, other people are going to have too. So I will say with FSMA 204, FDA has been pretty receptive to questions and from industry asking questions have given us more guidance documents and other tools to use so that they've been receptive to that. And then from there, sharing our expectations internally as well as with our suppliers or externally and in multiple ways. So it's not just through an email or a letter. It could also be during like doing a webinar or a call or a meeting. I remember with menu labeling, I helped implement that rule at one of the grocers and actually having our Some of our suppliers, our larger suppliers, come on site for a training of expectations around it and what we needed from them. Also going to the different stores and things like that to do training. So I found that different ways and repetition is the way to get people to start to understand. So it's not just one letter and you're done. Unfortunately, there's a lot of work that goes into it and strategy and how you want the program to be and understanding that ahead of time before you start announcing how you want it done is really important.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely true. And I love that advice of, take the time to to understand the regulations. And I think education is such a huge part of that. Um, and then really getting into transparency, how do you approach transparency in food safety practices?
I think we need to remember it's not a competitive advantage. We all want to have safe food. And so, understanding what you are willing can share as well as from your suppliers. And oftentimes it could be that they're willing to share, but maybe not in the method you originally asked them to share. So we may ask for documentation and the supplier isn't willing to share that. However, you can get on a phone call and have that discussion and understand their stance on it or go on site and look at their records and programs. So I think it's also being open and flexible to maybe you don't get it on paper. You can see it and evaluate it. And yes, you end up with those records by your note. So it may not be the way you intended it to be or maybe want it to be, but there is ways to find that transparency and it's being open to multiple ways of maintaining it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, we all know that transparency really equates to consumer trust. So, what strategies, tools, et cetera, do you think are most important to maintain that consumer trust and kind of measure it?
So I think for me, especially in the products I'm dealing with, is honestly our suppliers. And really, how do we ensure that our suppliers are providing us the safest ingredients possible? Um, the supply chain is so interconnected. And so a lot of what we do, um, having a software system that centralizes our expectations, having a supplier manual we're sharing with people of here's our expectations to be one of our suppliers, what we expect of you, to lay it all out there, to be transparent with them on our requirements, giving them, one system to enter stuff in instead of multiple emails from lots of different people to try to keep track of. And again, I think the other thing is follow up and consistency on our part. If the suppliers ask something of us, that we get back to them, vice versa, and continuing just to maintain that human relationship. A system can't just do it on its own; it needs the humans behind it and that people interaction to really drive home the importance of that transparency in the program.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, technology is amazing, but it's certainly only as amazing as the people that drive it and that culture and that passion that drives it. So definitely agree. So, given your extensive career, what advice would you offer to new food safety professionals, really about balancing that operational efficiency and not compromising on food safety standards?
I think it goes back to their why. I keep referring to that, but it is really important. If you understand why some of these things are important to you, it helps you start to balance things out. There's always, a big thing in food manufacturing is risk, and we're all balancing a risk profile. And so when you start to understand what's important to you, also identifying like what in a culture is important to you, helps you know where you're going. And so I would say to a young professional, sit down with yourself and really start to think like, what's your true north? Like, what's important to you from a culture perspective? Why is food important to you? To start to balance things out, to know which direction you want to go in.
Yeah, for sure. And, just reminded me of something you said earlier and thinking through kind of the different parts of an organization and the different levels. And have you seen a great way to kind of break down silos? We already talked about R&D and food safety, but, how do you break down those silos and why is it important to do that so that the full company is really, going in the same direction with food safety?
I think for breaking down silos, where I've had the best success is forming those relationships with people. And sometimes it's getting on a call with them, going and chatting with them in the office, having a meeting. There's lots of different ways we can connect with people. But oftentimes, when you connect with someone cross functionally and you start to talk about the situation, usually most of the time we were all going in the same direction. We just had different approaches or weren't understanding what the other one was saying. So being able to sit there and not try to do it all through email, because I know there's plenty of times I've read an emotion into an email that wasn't there and vice versa. So I think, that human connection is an important thing to help break down the silos and allow for collaboration.
Yeah, absolutely. So our final segment here is usually kind of looking into the future and what we're seeing in the industry. So, what do you see as, your food industry prediction kind of through the rest of the year and beyond?
I think we need to start getting ready to really understand and grasp chemicals. There's been a lot of discussion around it. It's always been a risk we've identified with for food, but do we really we don't, for me, do we understand it as well as we understand the microbiological risks? So how do we really start to gain some of that knowledge and start to understand the toxicology of chemicals even more? So I really foresee that that is kind of our next thing as an industry we're going to have to tackle together and really gain some understanding and share knowledge and have that transparency because we're all in this one together. Chemicals are part of our new world. They've been there. We just need to understand them and have a story around them and be able to talk about them. I would say even myself have a lot more to learn around chemical and the safety in our food supply chain and knowing that it is being discussed more and we're seeing more state regulations, discussion around regulations at the state level, that us understanding it as an industry and coming together can help us all work through it.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned that because you kind of have that background with, food science and then also with quality assurance and all of that. And it certainly feels like the industry is coming together with, no matter kind of, where you are within the supply chain, these things are relevant, right? So, yeah, I certainly agree. Like we're coming into that future really quick. Um, so, and just what do you think is really going to be the next big challenge that we face in this industry?
I would say probably the next big challenge, honestly, that's upcoming is the FSMA 204 compliance. I mean, we've been given a little time, but we all know through other big changes in regulations, like we think we're all ready to go. And then it hits and it's like, well, we have some learnings to then push things around. And I think that'll be the next thing that we will understand even more about what's going on in our supply chain. And I think open our eyes to some things they may not have realized. And that's a good thing. Because again, we're here to protect the trust of our consumers and keep people safe.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess the last question really I have is, you've been in this industry a long time. What is really the most rewarding aspect that you found in working within food safety in the food industry?
Knowing that I am continuing to make sure people are nourished and fed, but with confidence and knowing that safety is important and having pride about putting, product that I help manufacture on the table for my family and friends. And just knowing that I'm supporting people and millions of people out there that I will never meet or see, that I'm helping make sure that they stay safe.
I love it. Love it. Anything else you want to leave with the audience? Any final thoughts or anything we didn't go over?
I think, as celebrate your wins. I think as food safety professionals, sometimes we get stuck in the constant, oh, we got to deal with this, we got to deal with that. But to make sure to stop and celebrate your wins. It can help you continue to get through those harder situations. And we have wins. So to understand and also learn how to identify with them too.
Yeah, I love that too. Well, Laura, it's been a pleasure. I always enjoy, these talks and especially getting to connect with a Trustwell customer in this way. And so thank you so much for joining us on Food Tech Talk. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed this.
And for our listeners as well, thank you for joining and we'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us for another bite-sized nugget of Food Tech Talk, supply chain insights from farm to fork. Make sure to subscribe. And if you love the podcast, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. To learn more about Trustwell and request your free demo of our technology platform that connects food formulation, products, nutrition analysis, and compliant labeling with traceability, recall readiness, and supply chain transparency, please visit us at www.trustwell.com and click Get Started or click the link in the show notes to learn more. Thanks for listening.